We start with breaking news. Live pictures of Eagle Pass, Texas. This is the legal crossing in Eagle Pass, Texas. It is currently, as you see, just ahead of 6 p.m. there. State law enforcement in Texas can now arrest and detain and also deport people illegally entering the country. Emphasis on state law enforcement is now allowed to do this. The Supreme Court just ruled Texas can enforce its own border law put in place because the federal government, as they believe, will not secure the border. The White House slammed the ruling, saying that it will sow chaos and confusion at the border, adding that they believe it's just another example of Republican officials politicizing the border while blocking real solutions. Of course, there are real questions about how exactly Texas is going to enforce their law and whether other border states can enact their own laws. For example, even if non-border states could do it, could Florida or Georgia arrest and deport illegal immigrants? We're going to get answers from Brandon Judge in a moment. He's the president of the National Border Patrol Council. And with that, from Washington at 7 o'clock, we welcome you to the Ferris Show on television. First tonight, locked and loaded. A judge in Illinois just ruled illegal immigrants have the right to keep and bear arms. So rather than the circle with the line through it, we need like a thumbs up emoji there. The case is pretty simple. Police arrested an illegal immigrant living in Chicago with a gun back in 2020. They charged him for violating the federal law banning illegal immigrants from having guns. It's been on the books for a long time. Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman just decided the Second Amendment applies to him, the illegal immigrant, like everybody else, so he can have a gun. In her decision, she wrote that Humberto Flores received and used the handgun solely for self-protection and protection of property during a time of documented civil unrest in the spring of 2020, the summer of love. Court documents show Flores fired the gun at moving cars during the BLM riots in Chicago. He argues police officers warned him about looters who were approaching his neighborhood. Key to this ruling is that the judge says Flores' conduct heavily impacted her decision. He had no criminal record and was not considered a risk to public safety. This case is just one of many challenging that federal statute that prevents illegal immigrants from possessing a firearm. There are cases unfolding in states nationwide. Shan Wu is here, former federal prosecutor, turned criminal defense attorney, once a very senior officer at the DOJ. Good to see you. Should I be shocked that an Obama appointee found a gun control law that she didn't like?
No, but I think it's very fascinating that this whole push towards expanding the deference to the Second Amendment in some ways has kind of come full circle here, where something that really seems counterintuitive, the idea that someone who's not here legally still has that right, and you can't use this particular statute, which is commonly known as the felon in possession statute. But the way it's written, she really zeroed in on the language. He's not a felon. And the gray area, of course, is whether or not his status, and frankly, I think the way he was using the gun calls a little bit into question, how peaceful he is.
No, I mean, I guess the question, though, is what constitutional rights and protections then become absolute, right? Because illegal immigrants are still counted in a census. Mm-hmm. That is a huge deal in terms of representation. But then where do we get to right to work or right to vote or right to have a license to practice medicine or right to have a license to do all of these other things? Isn't this opening Pandora's box?
It could be. I do think, I hate to say this, but I think Congress would have to be a little bit more powerful here, because there's no question that the Constitution applies to people who are not here legally. They're, quote, persons under the Constitution, so that makes perfect sense. The problem here is you need to draw the statute more narrowly, and you might have to actually specify that being here in a non-legal status would also make you not eligible to carry the firearm.
Interesting. You have to think about what you said of Congress actually doing its job, which they rarely seem to be able to do. Key part of the ruling, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote in the court's majority opinion, we hold that when the Second Amendment's plain text covers an individual's conduct, the Constitution presumptively protects that conduct. Look, you talk to a lot of folks. You're pretty popular in liberal legal circles. Was there a bit of chuckling when people read this? Was it sort of... Yeah?
I think so. I mean,
a little more than a bit?
Yeah, it feels like a little bit, chickens coming home to roost. So,
in what sense?
In the sense of it's been associated, not entirely accurately, but it's very much been associated with the conservative court, a conservative movement to really expand the protections of the Second Amendment for gun owners. And here, of course, it kind of comes into conflict with the idea of, we also have to include this big issue with
so you said that the
immigrants.
Congress might have to do its job, right? Flores was here illegally, therefore he broke a U.S. law by coming and by staying. So this is that the Second Amendment applies without Congress amending the law. So Congress could pass a law tomorrow that says illegal immigrants cannot have weapons, period.
Right.
And that would fix this situation.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I would agree. You have me in funny positions. I'm agreeing with Clarence Thomas, too. But I think he's exactly right.
It's 2024. Odd things happen, don't they?
It's this presumption. The Constitution creates that presumption that whether you're illegally here or not, you have that right as a person here. But if the specific law says you're not allowed to possess it because of your status or a crime you've committed, then that would fix the presumption.
All right. Andrew Roberts, I thought, rightly pointed out, he's one of our star producers, that you've got a lot of these cases in different courts, so it probably ends up at the Supreme Court at one point or another. But oftentimes these district judge rulings and everything else play into other cases. And if you, as the left is sort of chuckling and saying, hey, this serves Second Amendment activists right, they're also saying, look, that these kinds of rulings then play into driver's licenses and whether the driver's license of a California resident who's an illegal alien is valid in Texas. How does that play out now?
That is really the tension with the federalism system. You obviously have situations in many areas of the law where the states have like this patchwork of differing kinds of decisions. And the Supreme Court, I think, it's hard to tell when they're willing to nationalize something. They're clearly willing to do it in the election context here. But for something like this, I think they're going to keep punting to Congress, which, as you're kind of suggesting, means that nothing may happen. Yeah,
no kidding. Good to see you, as always. Thank you. Appreciate it. Turning back now to the breaking news, the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court may be the only branch of government actually doing its job these days. It has voted to keep in place a Texas law that allows law enforcement to arrest, detain, and deport illegal immigrants. That is Texas state law enforcement. Brandon Judd is here, president of the National Border Patrol Council. Just so people understand sort of the very basics. In the past, if Texas state troopers, members of Operation Lone Star, came into contact with illegal immigrants, we saw this when we were down on the border, they had to deliver them to Border Patrol for processing. This means now that they can be charged under state law and directly deported by the state of Texas. Do you have any idea yet, now just a few hours old, how this is going to work?
As far as how it's going to work for the Border Patrol, it's going to be a huge multiplier in allowing us to deploy our resources. As far as how Texas is going to implement this actual law, they've been in preparation for months now. They've known exactly what has to be done. Texas DPS has been trained on what they're going to do. And so what's going to happen is when people enter Texas from Mexico, they're going to charge them with a state trespassing law. They're not going to charge them with an immigration law. It's going to be a state trespassing law. And that's a large reason why I do believe the Supreme Court overturned Judge Ezra's stay on this particular law. And when they take these individuals into custody, they're going to prosecute them for violating a trespassing law. That alone is going to drop illegal immigration in the state of Texas exponentially. Anytime you actually apply a consequence to a law, you can expect that law is not going to be violated. But what we're going to see is we're just going to see a shift.
Now, hold on.
They're going to go to New Mexico,
Brandon,
Arizona,
excuse me for
California.
1 second. I was just looking at something that's coming in. This now crossing the wire in the past couple of seconds. Mexico's government said Tuesday it would not accept the return of migrants that Texas orders to leave the United States after the Supreme Court allowed the state to enforce a strict new immigration law signed by Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Look, obviously, you have Mexico doing the White House's bidding in terms of wanting chaos on the border, which is sort of par for the course. To that sense, though, in a way, has the administration now end run the Texas law? They say there's going to be chaos. This seems to indicate exactly that.
No. In fact, this isn't going to affect it in any way, shape, or form. Because these individuals that cross our borders illegally, they're not going to want a criminal conviction on their record. And if they trespass, they're still going to be prosecuted for that criminal trespassing. Once Mexico refuses to take them back, then these individuals are going to be handed over to the Border Patrol or to ICE ERO. So the effect is still going to be the same. There's still going to be a consequence, and that's going to be a criminal conviction on their record. These individuals don't want that. The vast majority of the people that cross our borders illegally are ultimately one day hoping to get a legal pathway, whether that's a citizenship or a lawful permanent resident alien card. That's what they're hoping. And when you have a criminal conviction, that's going to become exponentially more difficult. That's why I do not believe that even the deportation is, the fact that Mexico isn't going to take these people back, I don't think that's going to affect anything as far as the deterrent, because there is going to be a consequence for the criminal trespass.
All right. CBP access to criminal history. Border Patrol has little access to the criminal history of migrants. 10% of countries in the world report that data to the United States. During the last 2 years, before COVID and Title 42, ICE had removed 261,000 people per year on average. Last year, ICE deported 142,000 people, 45% decrease, and obviously an enormous increase in the number of crossings. In the end, if the White House doesn't change policies as it relates to the border, does this Texas law actually change anything?
It does for Texas, not for Arizona, New Mexico, and California. That's what we're going to see the shift. We've already seen a huge shift. The total numbers across the southwest border have not dropped ever since Texas took over Shelby Park, but the numbers in Shelby Park dropped exponentially. We just saw a shift. So yes, we can expect to see the cartels shift and change their operations and move it to New Mexico, Arizona, and California. So no, overall, it's not going to do anything across the entire southwest border. But for Texas, it's going to be huge.
All right, Brandon, we always appreciate your time and your directness and frankness in these things. You've shown yourself to be an honest broker and calling balls and strikes on what things will and will not do. We appreciate it. It's good to see you. Coming up next, America spent years shaming Oprah on her weight. Now she's being shamed for losing weight. What we can really learn from her network infomercial on weight loss drugs.
There is now a sense of hope, number one. And number two, you no longer blame yourself.
Yeah.
Because when I tell you how many times I have blamed myself.
And colorblind, one doctor in Congress wants to take race out of medical school admissions. Can we legislate fairness when people's lives are on the line?
Took on the shame that the world gave to me. For 25 years, making fun of my weight was national sport.
Takes some courage to come out and say that. Oprah on an ABC special talking about her weight loss journey last night. She says she's been shamed, as you heard, her whole life for being fat. And now she's shamed for getting skinny. The new slimmer Oprah appeared on an hour-long primetime special. She said obesity is a disease and admitted that weight loss drugs helped her. But then she got shamed for being skinny. On social media, Oprah is on TV right now doing a special that is essentially an hour-long commercial for Ozempic, including advocating for giving children Ozempic. Grim. Who else won't be watching the Oprah special tonight promoting Big Pharma and pushing Ozempic? Joining us now, Dr. Gail Saltz, psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. First things first, what a change from 5 years ago, right? When everything was body positivity, big is beautiful, be fat and embrace it. And now you've got one of the leading advocates in the women's world saying, take weight loss drugs to be skinny like me.
What she's saying is obesity is unhealthy. She's not saying don't love your body or try to love your body the best you can when it's not exactly what you wanted. But she's also acknowledging that obesity is a real health problem. It is a mental health problem, and it is a physical health problem. We know that, right? And so she's saying, in light of that, if there are medications that can help with the disease that creates obesity and other health problems, why shouldn't we be able to use it? Why should stigma about obesity and maybe what people view as somehow an unfair or easy way out or not using your willpower? This really reminds me of psychiatry, right? Where for so many years we said, hey, you shouldn't take medication for depression. You should just have the willpower to pull yourself out of it. Not acknowledging it's a biologic illness, and so stigmatizing medications. And I think what she's saying is we shouldn't do that here.
NBC did the special, you can see. What is it, though, about now, sort of, as you say, destigmatizing obesity, that means Oprah can't get a break, for lack of a better term? Why is there this pent-up anger about saying what she said?
To be honest, I mean, I have to just go with conjecture here, but my conjecture is, because I see this with celebrities and people's reactions to it all the time, right? There's a lot of envy and jealousy about celebrities, wealthy, powerful. They're the people who can get the medications, who can afford the medications, when sometimes other people can't. And so I think we have a tendency to not exactly want to give those people a break. And I will acknowledge there's a lot of anger at pharma. There's a lot of anger at billion-dollar CEOs and expensive, overly expensive medications and people who can't get them because they're so expensive and it bankrupting our healthcare system. And that anger, I think, often comes out at anybody who appears to be a spokesperson of any sort. But then we're missing the forest for the trees, which is, at the end of the day, there are children who are genetically set up for obesity, and it hurts them. And there are adults who are in the same boat. And we don't want to stigmatize those people, whether they are obese and struggling or whether they have used medication in order to not be struggling anymore.
Okay,
we really don't want to.
All right. And look, 4 out of 10 in America suffer from obesity, 9.2 severely obese. This was Oprah from a long time ago talking about, and she's been open about this, the ups and downs of her weight. Take a listen.
I starved myself for nearly 5 months and then wheeled out that wagon of fat that the internet will never let me forget. And after losing 67 pounds on a liquid diet, the next day, y'all, the very next day, I started to gain it back.
All right, so she's on ABC for this special last night talking about this. She talks about her wagon of fat. Can this now be the end, right? Now that Oprah's admitted this and gone through all this, as if she is the soothsayer of all things, can we now dispense with the obesity isn't a problem, embrace it, fat is fine, on and on?
I don't think that she's actually saying fat is fine. I think she's saying this has been a lifelong struggle. And let me also point out, yo-yo dieting, losing huge amounts and gaining huge amounts are even more unhealthy. I think she's saying this has been a lifelong struggle, and it may, for her and for people who have this disease, continue to be a struggle, even with medications. But I think that what she's trying to say is if we can be more open and honest and use the science and turn to expertise and really understand, the better we understand what is going on, that hopefully we can be more empathic and compassionate and help people more than we do. Because the other fallout of all this, right, is, as she alluded to in the beginning, the shame and the stigma that psychologically cripples people, that gives them no self-esteem, and leaves them, not the kind of person that they could ultimately be. So I think she's also making that point, and it's a good one. It's an important one.
No, it is. And I think you made a fantastic point when you talked about the money involved in this. Places you can buy weight loss drugs: Ro, LifeMD, Henry, ReflexMD, Weight Watchers, all websites now that offer you prescriptions for these drugs. And you make a great point about how angry it makes people when they see people lecturing to them and they can't afford it. Doc, it's always good to see you. The perspective is an important one. Thank you.
Thanks for having me tonight.
All right. Coming up next, one school board got so fed up with angry parents. You remember all these pictures? Well, they turned the cameras off. We show you the pictures here on the screen, but they don't exist. How the school board justifies deciding our kids' future will be hidden from parents.
This is outrageous. People in here with their face lace and their face shields that are plastic, not stopping anything. All you want is submission to a lie.
Loudoun County School Board meetings, you might remember some of that video, changed America. The videos from the public comment sections, that's what you saw. During COVID, lockdowns brought the big issues to the national stage: critical race theory, transgender bathrooms, and lockdowns themselves, not to mention parents' rights. Well, this is what the Loudoun County School Board now wants you to see. And we're not making this up. They want you to see a black box. The school board in one of America's wealthiest counties will turn off cameras during their meetings. The Democratic members voted to turn off the cameras during public comment sessions. Here is one of those who voted to turn off the cameras, justifying the cord cutting.
I'm trying to avoid a Jerry Springer show type of episode.
I want our neighborhood schools to be excellent, and I want the division out of the news. Turning the cameras back on now only invites and undermines the work of the school board and the transparency of the school board.
Yes, censorship to promote transparency. If they teach George Orwell's 1984 in Loudoun County English class, the kids could just come to the meeting for a field trip. Cameras undermining transparency would be a perfect visualization of the novel. Joining us now, school board member Dina Griffiths, who voted against turning the cameras off. You wanted the cameras turned back on. What exactly are those who want to keep the cameras off so afraid of?
They're afraid of, I guess, they think a spectacle. They think they're going to get on the news in the wrong way, but they're not. They think they're making more out of it than it really is. And what it really is, and I put this motion forward, what it really is put the cameras back on the public. They come to be seen and heard. The cameras should be on the parents and the public. And I don't understand why they insist on blocking the public from speaking. Or
well, I think you said it. They don't want those moments where we've seen it a lot, right? Parents come in and they read from materials that are in the library or in sex ed class or in English class. They read the books out loud. And I would imagine for certain school board members, it's pretty uncomfortable to be hearing that read to them, and the sound bites make them look bad. I think the coverage of this is pretty amazing. The Washington Post back then was very interested in Loudoun County. How and why Loudoun County became the face of the nation's culture wars. And it was a fairly critical article of the students, and the school, the parents, and the school board was somehow the victim, on and on and on. You can imagine. The Washington Post masthead reads, "Democracy dies in darkness." Have you heard from a Washington Post reporter in the past couple of days trying to get to the bottom of why there's no cameras?
I have not, but, they seem to give their reasons as to why they don't want them. As I mentioned, a spectacle, but I feel that it's a disrespect to the public. I think every jurisdiction nearby uses their cameras on the public. We're the only ones that do not. Nationwide, most school boards have their cameras on the public. So just because we had a scandal a couple of years ago, they're really worried at this time that, they're going to have another scandal, I guess. And they don't want it.
Sort of, what are you worried about? It's interesting because the first clip of video we keep showing is of a father being arrested. And that was one of the things that really touched off this issue nationwide. Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, who won on the education issue, talked about that. Take a listen.
This is stunning. To be clear, this is the same school board in Loudoun County that tried to hide girls being sexually assaulted in bathrooms, didn't want to tell parents when there were overdoses at their schools, and now has the completely misguided view that turning off cameras increases transparency.
I get the Orwell reference, right? No cameras, and somehow there's transparency. What I think is interesting, also more interesting perhaps, is that the members of the school board won't come on and defend it. We asked everybody who voted to keep the cameras off to come on. All of them said no. I'm guessing that doesn't surprise you.
No, it doesn't. I actually wish I didn't have to be, speaking to you today. I was hoping we would get them turned back on. Again, it's just disrespect to the public. I think they should be turned on. As I mentioned, every jurisdiction nearby has them on. They're just using it. They're worried that, somebody's going to have their 5 minutes of fame or whatever because they are on.
They're also worried. Yeah, they're also worried they're going to have to answer for something, right? Their reaction to this, whatever's brought up, they're going to have to answer for. Dina, it takes a lot of courage to come on and be willing to buck the trend. I know these are folks that your kids go to school with, and their families you see in the carpool line. It takes a lot to stand up and say what you believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
One doctor in Congress says admission into medical school should not be determined by your race. It sounds obvious that only the most qualified should become doctors, but that's far from what happens, as discussed in Don Lemon's interview with Elon Musk.
But do you understand how by saying just that standards are being lowered, that you're implying that they're being lowered because people are less skilled and less intelligent, and you're talking about people of color and or women?
Look, I'm saying we should not lower standards.
But you don't?
That's it.
I think everyone can agree that you shouldn't lower standards.
Great.
But you're implying that they're lowering standards because of people of color or women, because someone is not a white male.
All right. Of the 155 accredited medical schools, 100% have admissions policies supporting diverse students. 97 have senior leaders committed to DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. 89% say DEI is prioritized. 91.1 have parental leave regardless of gender or sexual orientation. U.S. Representative Dr. Greg Murphy wants to change that by denying federal funds to medical schools that have DEI programs. All right, Congressman, good to see you, sir. Thank you. Is this really a problem? Are we in a solution in search of a problem, or is this actually happening?
It's a major problem, Leland. As you point out, the infinite majority of the schools that we're seeing right now have DEI programs, which by definition is divisive. We're trying to put healing and race relations together. We're destroying that. Even more so with what DEI is doing, it's not only attacking in the admissions process. Look at what's being taught in the school itself. We're being taught to have social justice lawyers, not physicians. What does having a discussion about social justice issues have to do with learning where your appendix is or what a gastric ulcer looks like? Yes, by far, we have different issues that deal with different races. We always have, and that's what we're taught in medical school. We're also taught in medical school previously to take care of whatever patient is in front of you, regardless of race, sex, gender, whatever they call it, or any type of things now. But now what we're seeing are quadrants and particles within the school itself that says, look, I don't feel comfortable around white doctors. Or, it's not okay if somebody makes fun of my pronouns walking around as a medical student with a political statement on. This is absolute nonsense.
Okay, so hold on. I guess we're separating two things, right? One is how the medical schools conduct themselves, then there's medical education, and then there's admissions. Deal with them in each silo.
Sure.
Your Educate Act eliminated all federal funding, you know how to hit them where it hurts, including student loans for medical schools that engage in the worst, in your words, DEI practices. No racist teaching, no racial discrimination, no loyalty oaths, no DEI offices. So you're not, I just want to be clear, are you taking an issue with, say, that diversity is a good thing?
No, not at all. I think diversity strengthens a population. The problem is when you force it when individuals, look, guys, we're not dealing with art school. We're not dealing with English school. We're talking about medical school. We're talking about where people's lives are at stake. And so
do you have specific examples of where medical schools, and to get back to what Elon Musk was saying, where standards are being lowered in the name of racial equity?
If you look at some of the charts, like we can cite them here, we show that the admissions rate, who gets in, depending according to race and MCAT scores, is markedly different. And MCAT scores are a direct correlative to your ability to understand, fully digest the body of knowledge that you have in medical school. And then your other tests in medical school talk about how well you're going to do as a clinician. These are what's happening today. And, so
what you're saying is that if you're white, you need this score to get in, and if you're black, you need this score to get in.
No, it's a much marked discrepancy.
Okay, so we'll go. But at that point, what you're saying is that there's research that if you have an MCAT score down here, we can trace that out, that your abilities as a physician are not going to be as good or as qualified as somebody with an MCAT score up here.
Yeah, that's always been the case. It's nothing new today than it was 25, 30 years ago. People want their physicians to be trustworthy. They want them to be the smartest. They want them to be the best diagnostician.
In a weird way, and I think this point's, I'm not making any new point, but you go to your physician and you see a degree from Harvard or NYU or Columbia or Hopkins or whatever it is, some great school hanging on the wall, and that person is of color. Suddenly you're wondering, hey, did they get in and they get a diploma because of their race or because they're really that good? It's sort of the most unfair to the highest achieving people who would have been.
Ask Dr. Ben Carson what he thinks about DEI. He thinks it's horrible in medical schools because it takes away merit and throws all these identity politics
You know Joe Biden's not going to sign this, right?
I know, but it's honestly a shot across the bow. The AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges and Universities, Dr. Skorton is running this. He did the same things at other institutions, and this is polluting what is the last bastion of really, I believe, excellence in this country. We should demand excellence from our doctors, not identity politics.
Oh, you would know. You are one. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Coming up next, Donald Trump sues ABC News and George Stephanopoulos for defamation. He might have a case. Trump didn't do it. What Trump could get that's way more valuable than money from old George. What happened when you guys said goodbye to each other?
It was very awkward. I actually shook his hand, and
Was he surprised?
He was surprised, and he was angry. He was just this little man standing there, this little troll sitting there.
He got up?
With that.
All right, Donald Trump is now suing ABC News and George Stephanopoulos over that interview. Stephanopoulos repeatedly said a jury found Trump liable for rape. In fact, a New York jury found him not liable in the E. Jean Carroll case, but liable for sexual abuse. There's a difference, a big difference. That's why the jury decides between the two things. You might remember we had Nancy Mace on for her first TV interview after the This Week dust-up.
And I don't need a man explaining to me or mansplaining to me what rape is. And I was assaulted and raped at the age of 16. I didn't need him telling me how I should feel. He can't possibly understand it. But to sit there and lecture me about rape and say things, quite frankly, that open up him and ABC News to grave liability.
And that's the issue. Perhaps there's liability, there's monetary liability, there could be other kinds of liability. A. Scott Bolden's here. He's already shaking his head. He's getting ready. NewsNation contributor, lawyer, and former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, Matt Gorman, former communications director, National Republican Congressional Committee. Gentlemen, good to see you. All right, you're shaking your head. Look, there's a reason that these are two different things. You can't say a jury found somebody liable for something that they didn't, can you?
There's not a bright line between sexual abuse and rape in New York. I'm barred in New York. I'm a former state prosecutor there. And I can tell you, even Judge Kaplan said in his public commentary about this issue that essentially, as people know the term rape as they interpret it, sexual abuse, much like in D.C. and New York, is the unlawful touching or fondling.
So this is
or
this
so
like
forth
legal
and so
idea
on.
of sort of different misconduct versus
And
materially
different
worse,
levels of
different
it, if you will.
worse and worse
okay,
misconduct.
did he penetrate or not is not the issue. Did he touch her with his body or part of his body? And essentially, that's what he was
Thanks for letting
convicted.
everybody get through dinner before we got to that.
I cleaned it up.
Okay, this is what I'm interested in, though, Matt. There's enough here to litigate, perhaps. I'm almost way more interested in George Stephanopoulos' notes, the emails and text messages with his producers about how this segment was going to go, and why, I don't know if we'll ever get to this, but why he chose to keep going over and over and over again, rape, when Stephanopoulos is a lot of things not stupid. He would have known the difference.
And also, as you know, when you're in the chair with somebody right there, and Nancy kept giving the same answer over and over again as the interviewee, time's on my side. There's a finite time in the segment. You want to make 8 minutes about this question. That's your prerogative, but time's on my side. And look, this is the point of this. It's not the point to win the lawsuit. It is the point to have an argument about this and to get really a messaging thing. And as you said, get in discovery, embarrass Stephanopoulos.
Yeah, but if you're going to file a lawsuit about it, when you're facing 91 criminal felony charges and you owe $500 million in other civil lawsuits, 2 civil lawsuits, can you win that lawsuit? Well, these are two public figures, if you will. And as 2 public figures, it has to be intentional. And he had to knowingly...
it's actual malice or willful disregard.
And he did it anyway.
It doesn't matter.
And it's too close. On the legal side, it does matter. Now, politically and messaging, that's a whole other story. Yeah. But it costs to file these lawsuits, and financially, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Much.
Well, what is it called?
As you said,
contingency fee?
$400 million. He's already in the hole. You know what I mean?
Keep going,
that's
right?
the point. It's just the messaging thing. He's running for president of the United States. It's about really being able to push an argument, saying, I already sued him.
But it's too close of a call. It's a waste of the court's time. It's going to get tossed because they won't get past summary judgment.
Yeah, but
because sexual abuse and rape are so close on the New York law. It is a legal issue as well.
In a way, we all, he's already won. Donald Trump is, because we're talking about it. We're talking about George Stephanopoulos and the like. Nancy Mace came out on this. Stephanopoulos thought he could use me in his shameful attempt to damage President Trump. It didn't work because I wouldn't fall for it. President Trump will always fight for the truth, so will I. All are on notice now.
You would agree that it's a fair question. I didn't see the interview, so if he went over and over again, I would tend to agree with you. And he was shaming her and so forth and so on. But 1 or 2 questions about how she reconciles supporting someone convicted of sexual abuse, right? He said rape versus the other one.
Since you said over and over again,
I didn't see it.
We put that together. Take a look.
Rape.
So it's a fair question to have her reconcile it, but I'm not sure it's a fair question to him to ask it over and over again.
I asked her when she was on the program, right? And Stephanopoulos thought he had the golden goose, right? He came right out of the gate with it, and then 8 minutes he just kept after it. We just played how many times he said the word rape. The difference is how many times you ask it, how you ask it on and on. Does that go, though, to the state of mind of the person asking the question? It may be there's a political part here, but there's also a legal part. If I keep saying a falsehood that I know is false over and 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 over again, doesn't that make it worse than just one time saying it?
Well, if you're going to be technical, saying it over and over, you have to believe that if you've got her caught up or not, you got to believe that you're falsifying the question, so the premise is false. When you cross-examine, once you cross-examine a witness in court, you cross-examine, you get what you can get, and you got to live with that witness's answer, and then you move on. That's fundamental. Here, it looks like he didn't move on, and that is a problem, I think.
All right. Well, and the discovery would tell us what they knew and how he was prepped for it.
It won't be long. It's going to get tossed in New York. It's too close a call.
Gentlemen,
good seeing you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Much. Pleasure as always. Bloodbath, Part 2, the latest meltdown about what Donald Trump said and what happened when Joe Biden said almost, and we mean almost, the same thing.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion.
You look at all of our presidents, they're saying Trump was the best for Israel, by far the best for Israel. And we're doing very well with the Jewish vote, as you can see in the polls.
Former President Trump there appearing to show no remorse for comments that set off a number of Jewish Americans, at least those in certain media circles. Here's part of his interview with Sebastian Gorka.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion, They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves because Israel will be destroyed.
To be fair, Sebastian Gorka has, shall we say, a questionable relationship with people who don't like Jewish people, but leave that to the side. That's who Donald Trump was talking with in his typically artful and nuanced way, opining on the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. And the meltdown began.
I feel like he's totally gone off the rails in a certain way, and he just gets cheers for doing that. But this was truly a disgusting comment.
I think out of all the things that Donald Trump has ever said that have offended my core, this is it. How dare you, Donald Trump, tell me what it takes to be a good Jew and not be a good Jew?
The White House called it unhinged anti-Semitic rhetoric. It got us thinking. If only, just if only, there was some other presidential candidate in recent memory, at any point, who demanded an entire group vote for him. How far back would we have to look? So we started looking this morning, and we only had to go back 4 years.
You got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It was wrong when Trump did it earlier. It was wrong when Biden did it. We're just trying to be fair. And we will be fair as we admit an error, at least an omission, in last week's War Notes. We listed a number of ways President Biden's staff is trying to keep him from answering questions. But we missed one way. Here's the president at a campaign stop today.
Wages up across the board. So, folks, look, I'm going on too long. I apologize. But that must be my traveling staff.
It's like they were playing him off at the Oscars. The president then continued his remarks. A lot more on this in War Notes. WarNotes.com gives you a first look at our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. Comes out at 4 p.m. every day, and you can subscribe for free. You can also reply to the email. We read them all, and we'll see you on social media. Your thoughts tomorrow night. Chris has got a lot of thoughts, a whole hour of them. Here he is.